Welcome back. One of the largest studies ever carried out suggests that eating disorders are far more common in adults than previously thought. Research by King's College London shows that more than half of people diagnosed experience their first symptoms when they are over the age of 18. Well, joining me now is Professor Jerome Breen, who's Professor of Psychiatric Genetics at the Institute of Psychiatry, and Dave Chawner, who's a mental health campaigner. Thank you very much, and also comedian as well. Thank you very much indeed for both of you just for speaking to us. Firstly, I'll just start with you there, Dave. If you feel comfortable, just tell us about your experience with eating disorder.
Yeah, so I suppose I've had adult eating disorders. I developed anorexia when I was a teenager, but I didn't really get help for it until I was 23. And anecdotally, speaking to a lot of people, it can be seen as something that's typically seen as a teenage white girl thing. But I actually think that as more and more studies come out and as more and more people talk about it, we kind of realise that those misconceptions might be wrong.
And Professor, I'll just throw this to you there, because as we were just hearing there, a lot of people associate eating disorders with younger people, particularly younger girls. But actually, as we're finding out from this report, it really is more common in older people. Why is it that this misconception still exists?
I think that's very complex. Eating disorders have traditionally not got the amount of clinical attention or clinical funding that they deserve, really, for how frequent they are. They affect about 5% of the UK population, and they're actually the most deadly psychiatric disorders in terms of their outcomes. Our study finds that the primary symptoms of anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder are, if not occurring in a majority of cases, at least in a good number of cases, over the age of 18. And it's notable that funding of adult clinical services for eating disorders does not match that age distribution in terms of when the disorders are starting. Additionally, we have this other problem that the childhood cases don't fall off a cliff edge at 18, that they don't have the same access to services when they become adults as when they were children.
And Dave, do you think that this misconception means that some people are just sort of falling under the radar, going undetected, and essentially just being left to struggle?
Absolutely. And look, when I say misconceptions as well, I really want to stress that I'm not getting all keyboard warrior virtue signaling, you're wrong for not knowing about this. I think it's understandable that there hasn't been such a dialogue around it, so people don't understand. But as we get better and we talk more about ethnic minorities, older patients, blokes, trans communities that will equally have eating disorders, I think underpinning all of that is that eating disorders are a mental illness. They're not really that much to do with food.
And Professor Breen, what are some of the other key figures that you came out with that you discovered in this study?
So we found that looking at anorexia symptoms, about 57% of people experience them over the age of 18. For bulimia symptoms, it's about 40%. But for binge eating disorder, which is actually the most common eating disorder, 52% were experiencing them over the age of 18. We also have looked at male participants. So men don't tend to join our studies at the rate that they should. But in the 6.5% of cases that we had in our study of 9,000 people that were male, we find that males are overrepresented in both very early onset, so onset below the age of 10, and onset above the age of 25. We use data from the Eating Disorders Genetics Initiative in the UK, and I urge people listening to this who have an eating disorder to join our study at edgiuk.org so we can carry out further research in the area.
And actually, I think that's a really good point that I just wanted to add on to that. If anyone is worried about eating disorders and are worried that they're struggling, BEAT is the UK's eating disorder charity. So if this has raised anything for anyone, then yeah, please just get in touch. It's beateatingdisorders.org.uk.
And Dave, thank you very much for that. That's very, very good advice there. So thank you for that reminder of that charity. But also, one of the things I really want to understand from you is that sometimes you may come across people with eating disorder and it may not be so obvious. I think some of the, and speaking about misconceptions, another misconception may be the fact that actually you expect somebody who's looking very gaunt and very sickly, but actually it doesn't always present itself like that, does it?
No, exactly. 50% of eating disorders are binge eating disorder. And I actually know when I was doing the Edinburgh Fringe a couple of years ago, a friend of mine came back from a gig and he was eating fish and chips. And as he ordered a curry that came. And when he finished the curry, he ordered another takeaway. And I said, mate, I just wanted to check. It's quite a lot of food. I'm not having a go. Are you okay? And he just said, I'm eating my feelings, innit? And I think a lot of people have disordered eating. Not necessarily everyone has an eating disorder, but I think we need to change this perception that you have to be absolutely at your wit's end, absolutely broken, absolutely on a cliff edge in order to get help. You don't have to be unfit before you go to the gym. Why do we always say that you have to be unwell before you look after your mental health? I'm sorry about the ambulance.
Not your fault at all. Professor Breen, just touching a little bit on what Dave said, it presents itself very differently, doesn't it? And actually, when you talk about eating disorders, we do have so many areas, don't we? We have bulimia, for example, then we also have anorexic. Just tell us about the differences.
Yes, so a lot of focus in eating disorders has traditionally been on anorexia nervosa. But actually binge eating disorder may be 4 times as common as anorexia. And it's an incredibly important disorder because it's associated with long-term mental distress and long-term physical ill health for patients. And actually, I think one of the things we see is that if you look at people with extreme obesity, actually a large number of those people actually have an undiagnosed binge eating problem. It may not be binge eating disorder, but often I think if those people had actually got help for their eating disorder, they possibly wouldn't be in obesity services, for example. And I think that's an important thing. So more attention to the diverse range of eating disorders might actually help other problems as well.
And very quickly, I'll come to you then, Dave. I just want to know how you're doing now. How have you got yourself to the stage that you are?
What a lovely question. I feel I'm further away from the anorexia than I have been in a long time. And I'm very lucky now in order to run courses to teach people to teach stand-up as a method of recovery in order to beat eating disorders. So kind of want to help other people. So yeah, I think I'm doing well. Thank you very much for asking.
Well, and thank you also very much indeed for speaking to us there, Dave, and also Professor Breen. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for your time on Sky News.